I'm delighted to be hosting this morning's annual Space Confluence. It's become a hard-earned part of our Irish Space Week activities and a very important one. And we welcome you here this morning. And thank you, because where I am, it's a beautiful sunny morning. I don't know where you are, but it's a really nice sunny morning here up in Dundalk. So as I say, I'm Niamh Shaw, and we have a fantastic morning ahead. It hopefully will encourage discussion and debate. And that's what it's all about. We're bringing you information about a very interesting space science mission in the hope that maybe you can bring it to the classroom. So without further ado, I'm going to stop and I'm going to pass you over to the amazing Stephanie O'Neill, our manager for the ESERO office here in Ireland, which is the ESES Education and Resource Office. Good morning, Stephanie. What's the weather like where you are?
I'm muted. I'm sorry, I did it again. Good morning, Niamh. Good morning, everybody. It's beautiful here in Clane, County Kildare. I have the first line washing out already this morning. The other one's in the washing machine. You may hear it in the background.
Oh my God, you're very organised.
So thank you everyone for joining us on this Saturday morning, and thank you for giving up your time. And I hope you really find it beneficial to you and your students. I'm going to take about 15 minutes just to kind of set the scene for today before I hand over to Niamh and the panel. And I'm going to share my screen now. Did you just confirm you can see it there? Can you?
Yeah, that looks great, Stephanie. Yeah.
Okay, great. So first of all, welcome everybody again. I'm delighted to be with you today. We hope you enjoyed the morning. We hope you find it really beneficial, and we hope it makes sense to you, and that you'll be able to have really rich discussion and be able to replicate some of it in your classroom. Before I start, just want to acknowledge and thank the partners for today's event. Of course, my colleagues in Blackrock Castle Observatory, who have worked tirelessly on this, like loads of other projects we work on, and also the JCT science team. This really is a collaborative event, and we couldn't offer it. I mean, when I say we, ESERO couldn't offer it without the BCO and the JCT partners. Also want to thank some teachers who joined with us earlier in the year when we put out the call for feedback using our co-creational approach. Some really good teachers gave us really good feedback and then met with us later in the year to help us put together the program for this. So thank you to everyone that has been involved in helping us to put this together. Also want to, of course, acknowledge Science Foundation Ireland and the European Space Agency, who are funders of ESERO Ireland. So quickly, just to show the program for today. So I'm going to take about 15 minutes, then I'm going to hand over to Niamh, and Niamh is going to give us an overview of the James Webb Space Telescope mission and highlighting Irish involvement in the mission itself. Then we'll have a fireside chat with our speakers, and I'll talk more about them in a minute. We'll have a short comfort break for about 10 minutes. Just to let you stretch your legs. And then you'll have the opportunity to go into breakout rooms, and the speakers will actually move around to your breakout room. So you won't be moving, but you'll have a chance to have a chat with each speaker. So if you want to take any notes while the panel is going on, or if you have any burning questions, you'll have a chance at that stage to speak to each of the speakers. Then we're going to bring everyone back together. We're going to try and bring the whole thing together to hear what happened in the breakout rooms. And really to hear at this stage, I suppose, what we would like to happen is to hear about discussions around what could or couldn't be used in the classroom. And we hope to finish everything, do an evaluation and close off and let you back to your busy Saturdays by 12:30. Those of you who've been here before know already what ESERO is. It's the European Space Education Resource Office. There's a network of 20 across Europe now, and in Ireland, it's a contract between European Space Agency and Science Foundation Ireland, which is where I work. It's a contract in each of the 20 countries between European Space Agency and a different organisation, but in Ireland, it's with Science Foundation Ireland. So ESERO really is like an ESA education office in each of the countries, and I happen to run the one in Ireland. And the objectives are to enhance literacy and competencies of young people in STEM, to motivate and enable young Europeans to pursue a career in the STEM field, and in particular in the space domain, and to increase young people's awareness of the importance of space research, exploration, and their applications in modern societies and economies. And one of the ways that we do this is to engage with you, the STEM teachers, to provide CPD like today. And as I said earlier, I hope you find it valuable, and I hope it helps you or supports you to engage with the Earth and Space strand of the junior cycle specification. Of course, today's event is one of the ESERO Space Week events. If you didn't know already, Space Week is the 4th to the 10th of October. You're actually at a Space Week event. If you want to find out about more Space Week events happening nationally, go to spaceweek.ie. And of course, Space Week is managed nationally by the team in Blackrock Castle Observatory. Well, one of our other events is on Tuesday in City Hall. It's our Space Careers Roadshow. And if any of the schools in Cork want to register them, I think there's a few seats left. It's for TY 5th and 6th year students. As I said, it's in City Hall, and the theme for this year's event is living and surviving in space, with some really interesting speakers. Cian Regan, it's being hosted by Niamh, of course, Cian O'Regan, Ciara Ward, and Captain Dr. Lisa McNamee. So really interesting presentations about living and working and surviving in space. And it will also be live streamed as well. So if you want to register for that, you can choose to either attend the event or that your students can watch the live stream on YouTube. All the European Space Agency classroom projects have now been relaunched for this academic year. CANSAT I'll talk about in a minute, but the ones we really run here in Ireland are CANSAT, Climate Detectives really are the one, and AstroPi. AstroPi is where students get a chance to write code, which is on the space station, run on the space station. Climate Detectives is where students identify a climate problem, and they've got to use data and use the scientific method to actually confirm or deny there's a problem, and then come up with some mitigating or monitoring solution for that. They've all been launched now, all open to your students. Mission X is just for primary students, so of no interest to you. Moon Camp is really for the technology students. It's about designing a habitat on the moon. But they're all open now and open to students to participate. CANSAT has been launched in Europe. We're just about to launch our CANSAT here in Ireland. We'll have all the documentation on the website next week. This is where students TY enough get a kit, an Arduino kit, and they build a satellite and they launch a satellite. We have 6 or 8 regional partners with the European, with what used to be the colleges, the institutes of technology, and they're all technological universities now. And they run training for teachers and students, and they host regional competitions. The winners of the regional competition go on to the national final, and then winners of the national final go on to a European competition. I'm just going to show a very quick video now from last year's CANSAT final. It's just a bit of the student voice, and just to show you, give you a little bit of a flavour for what happens at CANSAT.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
CANSAT because, well, at the beginning I wasn't very interested. Our teacher came to us about it and I was like, no, that's not for me. But then my friends were involved and they were like, you should really do this. And then I just looked into it and I was like, wow, that's actually a project that seems like worth investing time in.
I think it was a learning experience. I think we got a lot from it in the end. Like, the best way to describe it, our entire project was like a lesson in Murphy's Law. Not a single thing worked the first time. So I think it helped us with our problem solving and it helped with our teamwork.
I feel like it was really nice seeing everything come together, and then at the end and you see a parachute and you see certainly inside of a working can. It's a really satisfying thing.
Okay, so
5, 4.
do it again. Okay, so that's CANSAT. I hope that kind of gave you a little bit of a flavor of the excitement of CANSAT. It's one of my favorite projects. I think students who participate really get a huge amount from it, not only in terms of the technical skills, but particularly in terms of the softer or the 21st century skills. Also want to just share with you some of the ESA Teach with Space classroom resources. And if you just Google ESA Teach with Space classroom resources, you'll be brought to all these, and there are loads of them there on the ESA website. Just ESA Teach with Space classroom resources. ESA themselves also have some teacher training opportunities. These happen all during the year. I've only put up the last two because obviously the rest of them are finished by now. But these happen in Reggio in Belgium. There's one still open for registration for secondary teachers, which is taking place on the 14th to the 16th of December. And I've put this on the ESERO website now. So these are fully paid for by ESA. So you pay for your flights, and ESA reimburses you then up to a certain amount. And then once you arrive, they organize your accommodation and food and everything for it's usually, I think, 2.5 days. And that's in Belgium. I just want to highlight, I suppose, the ESERO.ie website. That's where you'll find all the information about everything that I'm talking about today, about all the resources that we have to support you and your students, particularly around the Earth and Space strand, but not only that as well. Also to mention Science Week, that's coming nice and quickly as well this year. It's the 13th to the 20th of November. It's a little bit later this year, but just scienceweek.ie is where you'll find all the resources and events happening for Science Week. Now on to today's conference. It's our annual confluence are coming together for educationalists and space experts. Just to say, we have a Padlet. It was circulated to you in advance, but maybe Francis, just for convenience, if you wouldn't mind putting it in the chat now. So we've started populating this Padlet already with resources that may be of help to you, and anything that comes up that we're talking about today, we'll pop those things into the Padlet as well. Feel free as well, if you have stuff that you'd like to share that you think would be useful to other teachers, please put it in there as well. So in planning the confluence, we wanted to use co-creation and design principles. So we wanted to get feedback from you, the people who are going to attend this conference, to know how could we best support you. So we did use co-creation and design principles. We reached out to you back in March and April. We asked you for your feedback. Some of the feedback that we got was that last year that you liked linking the event to a specific mission, and we've done that. We've linked it to the James Webb Space Telescope mission. You also wanted to hear about Irish involvement, so we have 2 speakers today who are directly involved in that mission. You liked that we spoke about specific learning outcomes, but also wider learning outcomes as well. So this year we're looking at Earth and Space 2. Students should be able to explore scientific model to illustrate the origins of the universe. And Nature of Science 1, students should be able to appreciate how scientists work and how scientific ideas are modified over time. So they're the 2 learning outcomes that we will specifically look at. But obviously, in the course of the morning, we will be touching on other learning outcomes as well. Also, something that was requested was an additional teacher voice. So we will have an additional teacher voice actually on the panel, and I'll introduce all the panel now in a minute. But these are the things that you asked us for, and these are things that we hope we're supplying that will make the day really beneficial for you. Almost finished now, but finally I want to welcome and thank our panel of speakers today. Of course, we'll be hosted by our longtime friend Niamh Shaw. I mentioned that the theme is the James Webb Space Telescope. I'm thrilled that JohnE Ward from Realtra Space Systems Engineering and Paddy Kavanagh from Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies. So JohnE was involved, and his company were involved in designing and making the camera that was on the Ariane 5 rocket. And I'm going to show a short video in a minute before I hand over. And at the end of that, you'll actually be able to see some of the footage from that camera. As the telescope goes out into space, you'll be able to see that footage at the very end is actually from JohnE's camera. And Paddy will be telling us about the data actually coming from James Webb Space Telescope and the work that they're doing in that in DIAS at the moment. Now, we originally thought this today would be a hybrid event with a face-to-face and an online, but it seems that online suits you better. So we didn't run the face-to-face. But at that face-to-face, we had planned to do a workshop on using that data in the classroom. But we will now offer that a little bit later in the year as an elective through the JCT group, and we'll be letting you know about that very shortly. So that workshop of how to use the data from the telescope will be available to you a bit later in the year as an online offering as well. And Frances is also investigating ways of how she's going to deliver the other workshop, the modeling the Big Bang, through a different method, maybe through the ISTA network. I'm also delighted that Frances is here today, and Frances and Martina McNamara, who's a science teacher and a JCT associate, they've got a pivotal role today. And along with me, if it's their job to make sure that the content that we deliver today is relevant to the first year, second year, or a third year classroom. So I think that's probably one of the hardest things that we're trying to do at this. It's easy probably enough to get motivational speakers from the, in the space sector, but it's about making that content relevant to a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, or a 15-year-old in the classroom. So hopefully we'll be able to do that today. And if there's any other ways that you think we could do that, please let us know, either in the feedback or directly. But that's really what we're trying to do. Just before I show that final video and hand over, I just want to say that we put out most of our information through Twitter. So if you haven't done already, I would please invite you to follow us on Twitter at ESERO_IE. That's where we put out most of everything that we do. Actually, we put out on Twitter. And the ESERO.ie website, that's where you'll find everything as well. And that's my direct email address. If anybody has any queries, any suggestions, or anything, feel free to contact me directly. And the next thing I'm going to do is just show that video. It's very short. It's only about, I think it's just under 2 minutes, but just to give an overview or an introduction to the James Webb Space Telescope mission itself. Watch out for the pictures from Paddy's camera at the end, and I'll go now and do that. And after that, we'll go directly back to me. Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Unité, top.
Thanks, Stephanie.
I have to show the ESA logo there.
You're not allowed, yeah, you have to.
Thank
you so much.
Just to highlight to everybody, I suppose that how do I unshare this now? Just I mean that James Webb Space Telescope mission is a joint European Space Agency, NASA, and is it Canadian as well?
Canadian, yeah, Canadian Space
Just
Agency.
highlight the real high level involvement of the European Space Agency, and that's our space agency, and in Ireland we're a member of the European Space Agency. I really want to drive that home because everybody knows about NASA, less people know about the European Space Agency and Ireland's membership of it. So over to you, Niamh.
Thank you, that's great. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Yeah, this is just a super mission. I mean, sometimes, you know, loads of stuff happens in space, right? So for all of space nuts, like we're always getting exciting about every launch that happens, but every now and again, there's a particularly special one and a particularly big one. And the James Webb Space Telescope was one of those, not only for Ireland's involvement and the fact, like what Stephanie said, that we were involved as members of the European Space Agency, but telescopes in space are particularly important because we can look deeper into our night skies than we can on Earth. If there's a telescope on Earth, don't forget all this air we're breathing around us, that's the atmosphere. And it tends to kind of make it a little bit more difficult to image things. So if we can put a telescope in space, we can see so much better. You may have heard of another telescope called the Hubble Space Telescope, which has also done a great share of work over the years in giving us beautiful images. And that uses a wavelength of light, which is visible light, which we all know about. But the James Webb was using infrared light. And we're going to hear a little bit more about why that's important from Paddy Kavanagh from the Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies shortly. I want to just give you some background information because we're thinking about what would be the hook for first year, second years, and third years. So first thing is the name. Who's James Webb? Who's James Webb? Because he doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue here in Ireland. But James Webb this telescope was named after the person who basically ran the very early days of NASA from 1961 to 1967. So this was like pioneer land. You know, this is when they developed their first rockets, and they had their first American go up into orbit, and there was the whole competition and all that. That all happened around then, that big race. And James Webb was key about that. And this, I think his name was given to this also because he was just as interested in human space exploration, which is how we put people, eventually got people to the moon, and they're now in orbit around the International Space Station. But he was also very interested in science. So this is a science mission, and it is an incredible mission. And like what Stephanie said, this is a partnership across 3 space agencies: NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency. And so the European Space Agency provided the launch site. So you saw it launch there on Christmas Day. So while you guys were all tucking into your turkey, all us space nerds, we were glued to the TV, hoping and praying that launch would be a success, which it was, which was perfect for Christmas Day. And they provided the launch, and they also provided parts of 2 of the instruments. And then the Canadian Space Agency also provided parts of 2 of the instruments. Again, Paddy's going to tell you a little bit more about that, so I'm not going to go into that too much. This mission cost $10 billion, and we were waiting a very long time for it to finally launch. The initial launch date was 2010, so 11 years later it finally happened, and the initial budget was $1 billion. And then that became 10 billion. And that money was spent in developing the telescope, constructing each of the components, and there was modifications made over the years, and then obviously testing before the launch. And it now rests in a site. I think I have it here. Where is it? Yeah, it here. If I just go back here, it now rests here at a Lagrange point 2, which is the special point. There's these like little parts in space where the balance between the pull of different planets or different celestial objects kind of balances out, and they're kind of perfect for orbiting because they don't need an awful lot of energy to stay in that one place. So after launch on December 25th, which you just saw there from Stephanie, it 1.5 million kilometer trip happened, and it eventually landed there at the Lagrange point. And it spread out its big tennis court kind of tinfoil back, and it has its back to the sun so that the telescope is facing the other direction. And the reason why you have all these layers of tinfoil behind it is to keep as much heat as you can away from it, because infrared requires heat to be able to look into our night skies. Irish involvement, if I just go back to that lovely picture, of the telescope when I'm saying this. Irish involvement, yeah. So we're very lucky that we have JohnE here from Railtra, and we have Paddy here from Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies. And JohnE's going to tell you more and about the importance of that video and why that video was so important. So they provided this infamous camera on board, but they also worked with other companies in order for that to happen. They worked with a company in Newry called Resonate, who helped them test that video camera. Then also there's another Irish company called Nammo Ireland, which are a subsidiary of a Norwegian company, and they provide the structural support for the actual launch vehicle. And then lastly, Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies were very much involved in the development of one of the instruments, and again, Paddy will tell you all about that. Do I have anything else to say to you? No, I think that's really it. I'll just go through my slides. This is, you know, you're science teachers, so this is just a graphic to show you that, you know, we obviously use visible light, and the Hubble Space Telescope used visible light, and that allows us to capture certain elements of the night skies. But this is an image here of the same thing, the pillars of creation. On the left, you have visible, taken with a visible camera, which was on the Hubble, and then this is what the image looks like with infrared. So it highlights different things, and it shows us much more deeper into the universe, and that's why the James Webb Telescope is so special. And you know, it spent many months being commissioned and setting up. You know, it spread out its tin foil, and then it's got its 18 hexagonal mirrors all focused. And the first images came through on July 12th, which Paddy will share with you. And since then it has been giving and giving and giving. There's no end. I was at a conference there in Granada a few weeks, the Planetary Science Conference, and this is just my last slide. It's just a holding slide. And they had people from NASA JPL there, and they were releasing what they had been observing Mars, just the surface of Mars, and using one of the instruments, they were able to tell the composition of the atmosphere and different things. So watch this space. This telescope is just going to blow us out of the water. The Hubble Space Telescope gave us amazing imagery, but we expect there to be even more coming forward. So this is one of the 5 images that were launched on July 12th. I'm not going to say anymore because I want to whet your appetite for what's coming with JohnE and Paddy. And that brings me.
Niamh, can I just add there, sorry to cut across you,
yeah.
Niamh, can I just add, I actually was at a presentation, a Space Week presentation in Maynooth during the week, where we were told, you mentioned that the launch on Christmas Day was successful, but apparently it was so successful that they now expect the telescope to last at least 10 years more than originally planned. So I'm sure Paddy can tell us more about that when it comes to.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely flawless. Like every moment of it was flawless. And of course, every time something launches, there's always the threat that something's going to go wrong, and then all that work, that $10 billion doesn't happen. So on a human level, the achievement of this is phenomenal, let alone what it's going to show us. You know, every single step of the development of it has gone ahead. So a fantastic achievement in working together and collaborating, and just that whole that sheer determined attitude that people have, that if you break something down into its achievable chunks and you make it happen, a bit like preparing for the junior cert or the leaving cert, this is a perfect example on preparation and then just deployment and seeing how it goes. Okay, so I've said enough. I just wanted to kind of set the tone. I've just given you kind of a 10-minute kind of brief overview from the human element of it. Let's bring forward JohnE. So JohnE, you work at Railtra, and which is a space science engineering company. I'll just keep chipping in from time to time, but tell us a little bit more about Railtra, your role, this amazing telescope, what it was like, and what that day was like, and what you provided for this mission.
Did you want me to do my small slides, Niamh?
Yeah, please. Yeah, okay, no, please
sure.
do. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll jump in if I think of anything. Yeah.
Super. Let me do that here.
Where are you today? Let's do the weather check. Where are you today, John?
I'm in beautiful Delgany in Wicklow. And it's sunny. Yeah, so
we have good weather today.
So this just a little bit here about Railtra and our involvement with the JWST mission. Railtra itself is a small startup. We're based in Dublin, just outside the airport, and we're primarily involved in making hardware for space, for use in space, be it on a rocket or be it on a satellite, ESA, or even just private companies. What I wanted to talk a little bit about was just how we had to come up with the concept for a video system that would go on the Ariane 5 launcher to carry the James Webb Space Telescope, which didn't exist before, and how we had to shake it, bake it, shock it, zap it to make sure that it could survive the very violent launch. And yeah, you know, we went from concept to delivery of the system within, I think, maybe under a year and a half in the middle of COVID, which is unheard of really in the space industry. You're talking, as you said, 10 years for the JWST. A little bit more complicated, I'll admit, than our camera system for a launcher. But I'll just talk a little bit more. So I was kind of just a little bit about my path, because I know there was discussion about, you know, where we get to now. And so I started, you know, I'm from Glenties in Donegal, and in secondary school, for me, I liked, you know, physics and mathematics. I had that competency, and a bit of tech drawing and stuff like that, but there was never really any discussion about space whatsoever. And really my love for space just came from the fact that I could see the night sky in Donegal. And so I aimed to do a degree in physics and astrophysics in Maynooth. And through that, I got some internships at the University of Chicago, where I was launching balloons, carrying scientific experiments from the Arctic. Did a PhD then in particle astrophysics in Dublin, which is with telescopes to study the origin of cosmic rays. Went to the US then to launch more experiments from balloons. And that's really where I got that exposure to space and how you have to really test your hardware to make sure it can deal with all the extremes. And I got to launch a balloon from Antarctica and then go down the following year to try and recover our experiments. That's another story. Then to Spain for 5 years, where I was working in La Palma, but living in Barcelona, and decided maybe academia wasn't for me. Moved into private industry in Barcelona for a couple of years, launched 2 nano satellites with that company for commercial purposes. And then after, well, nearly 9 years away, I wanted to come home, and by luck, I got the Realtor job. And just as that moment, I jumped into the JWST video telemetry system. So kind of a meandering career to date.
Fascinating.
But I made it through. I was kind of just going to explain a little bit, Niamh, about why. That's great. Why we have to test these things. And what we did to test this video system. And it's primarily because a rocket is a very violent and shaking thing. If you want to bring something into space to do observations like the JWST, you need to carry it on a rocket. It's like the lorry of the business. And what it is essentially, it's fuel, oxygen, and oxidizer. You put it into a combustion chamber, you make an explosion, and much like a balloon, letting out the gas at the back, your rocket propels your whatever you put in this payload in the cone up into orbit. And so that controlled explosion as such is a very, very violent process. And so we have to do a lot of testing to make sure our system can survive. So this is like the engineering aspect of this. Just so you see what these parts look like from the drawing to reality. On the left-hand side, you have what we call the fairing, or the cone of the launcher. So that's in 2 parts. And you can see in the center there, there's a satellite. And so ultimately, this is where you need to put your spacecraft when you're taking it up. In the middle, we have a fuel tank with part of an engine at the base. And on the right-hand side then, an example of an engine. And they're always in rockets. Like those 3 parts are the main kind of parts of a rocket, aren't they? There's always a fairing, because you're always sending something to space, so it has to be covered and protected in those 2 halves. There's always a rocket and there's always an engine, right, JohnE? That's pretty much it. Yeah, exactly. You put some fuel together, make it blow up, and hope that it gets it up there. Yeah. Now, partially the fairing thing is important because it motivates a little bit about why you needed a video system in the first place. So the Ariane 5 launcher, they never had a video system on it. The Ariane 5 is the name of the ESA rocket that the standard design that they use. Exactly. So the Ariane group is a company. It's a Franco-German company primarily that makes rockets to carry European Space Agency and commercial satellites to space. And their workhorse launcher is called the Ariane 5, which is retiring, I think, in 1 or 2 more launches, being replaced with the Ariane 6. But in the case here on the left-hand side, we did the JWST. I won't go into the details about it, but just as you mentioned, Niamh, when it's fully deployed, it was the size of like a tennis court, this sun shield at the base. Obviously, we don't have rockets that are big enough to incorporate something at that size. So you had to fold it up and package it up. And on the right-hand side, you get a sense of how the JWST looked when it was in the fairing, in the cone. The issue being at certain areas, there was just 10 centimeters between the James Webb Space Telescope and the fairing. And as I mentioned, you know, it's a very violent shaking system. So NASA, ESA, Canadian Space Agency were naturally worried about, you know, would it get a smack on the way up? And so a video system was you know, necessary just to look visually to see did anything negative happen. And through Ireland's involvement in the European Space Agency, Railtra was given a contract to develop this camera system and to put it on board through the whole thing, through powering the camera system itself and even transmitting the data down to ground, which is something that's never actually been done before, and especially on the Ariane 5. Well, when I say never been done before, I mean the system that has all of that components has not been done before.
Yeah, amazing.
So that's kind of the justification for why we did it. Here, just a little bit about the Ariane 5. We mentioned the Lagrange 2 point where the JWST's final destination, but just to give a sense of the power behind the rocket, it carried the JWST to about 1,400 kilometers. You see where this is the point where it got separated, if you can see my cursor. That took about 27 minutes. So the average velocity of the Ariane 5 launcher was 31,000 kilometers per hour. So that's essentially you get Dublin to Donegal in about 5 minutes at that speed, which I would love because I could get up much quicker. But just to give a sense of the kind of the power behind these systems. So, you know, making a video kit sounds simple. It's a video system. Sure, we have them everywhere, CCTV, etc. It's not exactly like that because you need to have a really high definition system because you need to see properly, but it also has to survive this rocket and space. So you have temperature, you have the sun where you have no atmosphere and go up, you know, hundreds of degrees. You have the cold of space down to negative hundreds. So our system had to try and survive at least some extreme amount of temperature. Radiation, high energy particles that are flying through the universe, they can flip bits on your system. So you need to test for that. It shakes and there's explosive shocks where this cone has to separate. So you need to blow it apart. So what you had mentioned earlier about doing the testing was that you know, we were all ready to go. We were actually going to go to Germany with our system because that had all the systems we needed. And then COVID struck, and about a week before they closed the borders, or a week after, excuse me. So we had to stay in Ireland, and Ireland didn't have the full capabilities to do all the testing we needed, which was, you know, thermal cycle, a vacuum, a vibration shock, EMC, which is, I will not go into electromagnetic. But by the end of that period, we'd actually worked with local industries on the island. So we have vibration testing in Newry, we have thermal vacuum in Dublin and in Bio, EMC in Meath. And all of that was done basically through the pandemic. So now in Ireland, we have the capability to go from a concept of a system through the full testing suite on the island. And that's something that was
fantastic, isn't it?
Pretty remarkable to support the ecosystem. Just an example for people, so maybe, you know, people can get a sense of what I mean by violence. This may not come off well virtually, but I'm going to show two videos. The one on the left is one of our cameras. We call the video system Vicky, or Video Kit, very original name. But this is a Vicky camera on the left that's going to get vibrated here. And I'm not sure if you see it very well, but you can see there's a very, very high frequency oscillations. The right-hand video is essentially how we do a shock. This is done up in Resonate. It's essentially three sledgehammers welded together, dropped on a metal plate, and your camera, you see if it's still working afterwards or if anything flew off it. Same for the video, or for the battery system here. This black box was the power we carried ourselves. It got a shock. This was important to show to NASA and ESA because this battery box would have been located maybe 2 meters away from this $10 billion spacecraft. Batteries have a tendency to explode sometimes, especially lithium ion. So we had to make sure that we justified that the system was safe before they let it near the launcher. Luckily, we did. Here's an example of the video systems you saw in the nice video of the JWST being covered with the fairing on the right-hand side. So these are the two cameras that were oriented to look up. So you see in the top left, this is the Vicky system. Here's our cameras with illumination and various power and data acquisition units I'm not going to. The launch on Christmas Day, I'm going to show here a video on the right-hand side. This wasn't actually streamed live. This is from inside the fairing.
Wow.
So not really sure if I'm meant to show this, but it is pretty awesome. And this is kind of the sense of what's happening. You're going to see the fairing separate here, hopefully. And so this is what I mean about the separating of the cone.
Oh,
And then
so
you
that's
see
the
this
moment
beautiful
of separation. It's beautiful.
Exactly.
The light then
So
is illuminated.
here we have the beautiful high definition video of the JWST, and immediately you can see that no parts have flown off, or
No.
there's nothing on fire, which is what they were looking for. That was a pretty terrifying day for us because we really didn't want to. We wanted it to work. We spent a lot of time on it, and blood and sweat. And in the final video, which is really the special one, this is the deployment of the JWST off the top of the Ariane 5. And I'll just start this here. So this was extremely important for us, and I think very special for everyone who's involved. So you get the sense now the Earth will be in the right-hand side.
So
this
bright.
is the deployment here.
Wow. Look at that, Johnny.
Yeah, so this was a really special for us. I mean, Realtree, we didn't build the JWST, we weren't involved in it like Paddy and Gaius were, but for us to be able to provide this video to the world was extremely exciting, especially as a young Irish startup. We only begun in really late 2018. So this is our first major project, and this was actually the very first flight of the video system. So this was the maiden flight as well. So it was extremely important.
There was a lot at stake, but you succeeded. I mean, it was flawless. Like
Yeah.
incredible.
And the beauty of the video wasn't just PR, because you'll see now the deployment of the solar panel, which was actually not expected to happen so soon. And this was already justifying the inclusion of the video system, because what it implied was that the injection, or we call it the injection of the JWST into its trajectory to L2 was so smooth that the system itself realized that it wasn't tumbling a lot, and so it was safe to deploy the solar panel, as you see now. And that was partially where they got the sense that that the orbit or the injection was so good that the JWST wouldn't need to use a lot of its fuel to get to L2, and that's why it doubled the lifetime of the mission, essentially. So just a simple video system, simple optical system like that helped to at least understand quickly what was happening. So that was kind of a wham bam tour through the whole thing there.
So what was your Christmas day like after you saw that video? I mean, it must have
it
been
was
day,
I mean, I watched it with my dad, so
it
was very special, just the two of us with a laptop watching the stream. And I think afterwards, I spoke with a lot of my colleagues. I'm not going to lie, I had quite a bit of champagne as well afterwards. A very, very relaxed Christmas dinner. So we were just really thrilled, because, as I said, it was a very difficult period for us, a young company.
I can imagine.
In COVID, traveling around, driving to Newry, driving to Meath during the middle of everything. So it was, incredibly special.
Overcoming a lot of odds to make it happen, and congratulations. And now if we go back to, the mindset of first, second and third years. So like, where did you start with the testing? How did you know what kind of vibrations you needed to design for? And did you come up with those tests? Like, were they like, the vibration one of the sledgehammers? Is that something that you designed yourselves, or was it already kind of, this is the standard way to check, or whatever? Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah,
so the way it usually works is the customer, let's say, so the people who build the rocket, they give us a set of requirements. So they say, this is the vibration levels that your system will see. So you need to shake them to meet these levels. And by levels, I mean, it's essentially an acceleration against a frequency range. So rockets will shake in different ways. They'll have very low frequency wobbles, very high frequency, with various levels of aggression, shall we say. So they gave us these definitions, and we had to input those into the level, into the systems that do the testing. In terms of the triple sledgehammer dropping on a metal plate, that was done with Resonate. So we never had a shock system on this in the island, and we were doing vibration. We were like, we have to figure out how to, we did some shock testing in Germany, but we're like, we did it over the phone. Literally, I was on the phone to my German colleague. We're like, we need to do it again here. And they were like, well, send us the levels and we'll come up with a solution. And we got that. We sent it to the European Space Agency and NASA and Ariane group. We were like, look, is this, will this work? Are you comfortable with this? And they were like, yes, you injected the levels we need, that's fine. And they understood with COVID and stuff. And so that was partially done in a co-engineering sense. So a lot of the testing as well, the way we work, not everything worked first time, of course, things broke. Of course, yeah. So you have to figure out what broke. You have to come up with a solution and a fix. And we were doing that in days. So the turnaround that we were doing was pretty incredible, because usually it can take months to come up with the root cause, implement a fix, and then validate it. And we were doing that in literally days. That's how hard we were working. So you need to have that dynamic ability to not lose your head when it breaks, find out why, come up with the fix, apply it, justify it, and continue. And so we did that very well.
Yeah, you really did, Johnny. It's a fantastic story. And of course, I think Realtor being selected was in and of itself a first for ESA as well, wasn't it? I mean, you overcame a lot of odds. Like your story is very special.
Well, we were, at the time, we were less than 10 people. And I think in terms of,
amazing,
I think we were 4 or 5 of us that were running around. And with Ariane Group and the European Space Agency, I think, as I understand it, we're the first startup company that they've ever put any equipment on their rockets, because, it's a risk. They don't want you blowing up their rocket and the spacecraft on top of it. So, but we had an excellent working relationship with them. And I think that's partially the power. They enjoy working with Irish companies, from what I understand, because we're quite friendly, I guess is the term and stuff. So we have a great relationship with them. And now they've already given us work for several other projects as well. So it's been great for us.
Yeah, fantastic. That's terrific. Thanks, Johnny. We might come back to you in the plenary, and if you have any more questions for Johnny, don't forget you've got the breakout sessions coming up. I was trying to think when I was listening to him about what are the kind of questions that might come up, but you guys will know better. But thanks, Johnny. That was brilliant. So let's now let me now just talk to Dr. Paddy Kavanagh from the Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies. Good morning, Paddy. Where are you? And what's the weather like? We have to do this.
Just up the road from Stephanie in Kilcock in County Kildare.
So the weather's just
it seems to be a pleasant morning outside, a bit cold. But
yeah, it's great, isn't it? Oh, I hope all winter now is like this. It's very easy to get up when the sun is shining like this. So you're coming at it. So now we've had kind of the engineering side of it from Johnny and Realtor and all that kind of stuff. And now you were at your involvement was more from the instrument side of it, and then also from the gorgeous data. So would you take us through that? And then if I think of questions, you don't mind if I jump in and ask along the way?
No, not at all. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So just I work at the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies, and I had to update this slide because I'm a former JWST software and calibration scientist. I officially, we turned over MIRI to NASA this week. So we no longer have responsibility for the instrument. But I'm now an SFI IRC pathway fellow working on, so I switched my t-shirt now to the science side, and work on the evolution of cosmic dust and star formation for the next few years.
And is that going to be using JWST data?
Using JWST, yes.
Congratulations, that's great, Paddy.
So I don't have a slide on how I got here, but I can tell you that I much the same as Johnny, I came through the system, and I guess the kind of unusual path for me was that I did leave secondary school. I dropped out when I was in 5th year for family reasons, and not because I had bad grades or anything, but my mother grabbed me by the scruff of the neck a couple of weeks later and dragged me back because she knew I could do well. And in the end, indeed, I got into university, won a fellowship or a scholarship to do a PhD at DCU. Went to Germany for 5 years working at the University of Tübingen, and only came back to Ireland. I was very, very happy in Germany and I was doing very well. But my wife is also an astronomer, and she got a position here in Maynooth University. So I had to find something. And this position working on MIRI came up. working on JWST, and I applied and I won it. And it was the best unexpected decision ever, because I'd never had any intention of working on JWST. My background is in X-ray astronomy, so completely different wavelength. But came back in the last 7 years now has been insane.
Yeah.
Particularly the last year has been unbelievable.
Did you know it was good when that day happened and you accepted? Did you know at the time how important this telescope was going to be?
I knew how important it was, but to be honest with you, because I never really I didn't work in the infrared. I was in the same kind of disbelieving cohort of astronomers that it would never really happen.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Because it was going on so long.
There was a lot of people who thought it would never be launched because it was costing too much, and eventually the plug would be pulled and it would just be scrapped. And but in the end, and you know, even when I worked on it, that was still a possibility at times. But no, I never thought it would happen.
I don't think I did
working on it,
yeah.
And some part of me never thought it would happen. But in the end, it happened, and it's been amazing. Yeah,
I think it's just fantastic that you're involved in it. And, you know, I've sat through some of your talks, and I just feel really lucky that we have access, you know, firsthand from an Irish person who, you know, who's touched James Webb the same way JohnE has, you know. I think because I think this telescope is going to be telling stories for very, very, very long time.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the thing you kind of mentioned it in your talk that this telescope, it's like it, you know, normally telescopes evolve kind of generationally. You know, there'll be some telescope and then there'll be some improvement to it and some improvement. But this telescope skips ahead several generations. And that's why it's so amazing. It's everything it looks at. And it observes every day. It observes a bunch of targets every day. And every single one of them is groundbreaking.
Yes, yes.
It's absolutely incredible. And I remember hearing a description of, after it was launched and it was deployed and everything was working, that the best description of the astronomy community I heard was that astronomers were giddy because they just couldn't believe that they had this thing about to start doing observations and the advances it would lead to in our understanding of the universe. But amazing. You know, it's gone extremely well.
Yeah. So take us through something and then we'll get to July 12th when everything started to go even more magical and we started getting data back. So
yeah, so I just wanted to go through, you know, the involvement we had at DIAS with the telescope itself, and just to give you a little tour through commissioning, or my tour through commissioning, and then I'll show some of the science images and what that means for us. But you know, Niamh mentioned that and Stephanie mentioned that the telescope was built through a collaboration between the European Space Agency, NASA, and the Canadian Space Agency, and overall, a total of 14 countries worked to build a telescope, and Ireland are one where this, okay, I can't see my own mouse, so I assume you can't see it, but we were one of the countries involved in the development of one of the science instruments. So when everybody's familiar with the picture of the telescope, that it's just the, you know, 6.5 meter mirror that's gold with the hexagonal segments and the sun shield, which is the tinfoil.
The tinfoil, as I said.
You know, which is to keep the mirrors and the instruments cold, because if you don't keep the mirror and the instrument cold and you're trying to look at infrared radiation, which is what we feel is heat, you're trying to look at a candle in a furnace. Okay, all you will see is the heat from the mirror. So you need to keep everything really, really cold, like minus 250 degrees cold. So the NASA built the observatory, so the mirror and the sun shield and everything that was built through NASA by contractors. The science instruments, however, is where the European Space Agency and Canadian Space Agency's contributions to the telescope itself come in. And the European Space Agency built NIRSPEC, which is a special type of instrument to split light up and see what elements, for example, are in whatever you're looking at. And we also contributed to MIRI. And MIRI is the mid-infrared instrument. It's the instrument that sees the lowest energy light going into the telescope. And all that means is it sees the light that passes through gas and dust in the universe very easily, and it sees light, the very first starlight in the universe. So it was designed for these specific reasons. And all of these instruments sit at the back of the telescope here in the Integrated Science Instrument module. And what we contributed to MIRI is the filters in the filter wheel. Okay, and the filter wheel is the thing on the left, the round thing. So Ireland, in partnership with Sweden, paid for the colored little segments you see around there.
Yeah.
So we paid for them, and they were characterized here in Dublin. So we tested them here in Dublin many years ago. And you can see Miri there. These are people working on it at Airbus in the UK who built Miri. And this, so you can get an idea of the size of it, but this filter wheel was put in there. And because of our contribution, we get access to some guaranteed data. So we get guaranteed observations with JWST once it's completed, and that's ongoing now. So
that's fantastic.
My current position kind of is based on those guaranteed observations. So what these filters do is basically pick out specific wavelengths of light that will show you something very, very interesting in the universe. So this is an animation of light going through the optical system, through our filters in the filter wheel. And the light gets bounced around several mirrors and is eventually passed through the filters, which filter out all of the stuff you're not interested in and keep only what you are, then hit the CCD array, and that gives you an image in a specific color. And what you do is you build up, you change your filter and you build up the colors. And in the end, you can then combine these colors into the very beautiful images you see released to the public and so on. But they're very scientifically important as well, because they tell you about what's in the image you're looking at.
So in simple terms, if you don't mind me saying, just because I'm thinking of the science students, so it's like a camera. It's effectively a camera, and it's taking in the light. And then what you're doing is you have different filters on, so that because that filter is on, it's pulling out a specific type of light that you're interested in, and then it has a range of those, and then you build them back to make a composite image, and that's how they're getting those beautiful images that we see today.
Exactly that.
That's it.
Exactly
Okay,
that.
cool.
So it's much like, the classic example in the optical is to have a red, green, and blue filter.
Yeah.
And then just combine them, and you would get a true color image. So it's the same idea.
It's the same thing, but different filters, because it's a different kind of light. Okay, that makes sense. That's amazing.
Yes, but I hasten to add that the imaging capability of Miri is just one of the capabilities, right? Wow. It's just a small part. It's not a small part, but it's also, Miri is a spectrometer and a coronagrapher as well, which are more advanced instruments.
Yeah, because that guy at JPL was talking about using Miri to be able to determine the composition of the gases and stuff on the surface of Mars. There's obviously a lot more going on. Yeah. Amazing.
But we contributed to the imager system.
Fantastic.
So after Johnny's great, and that video, by the way, is
isn't it amazing?
Something else. I remember seeing it on Christmas Day myself and going, wow, that's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it was everywhere. It was such a great achievement. But after JWST was deployed by the upper stage of the rocket, it went on out to L2. Went through 2 weeks of its own deployment. So, it doesn't sit in the nose cone fully deployed. It has to go through a series of unfolding steps, which was incredibly nerve-wracking as well. When everybody else had kind of forgotten JWST after the launch, all of the astronomers were sitting still in bits, because it had to go through between 300 and 400 single point failure deployments. Okay, so that means that if any one of those small latches or mechanisms that unfold the telescope didn't work, and there was I think 370 or 80 of them, then it was a $10 billion piece of crap flying through space. Okay,
and it was folded because, like what Johnny said, the fairing, or the top of the rocket, or like I always call it, like the delivery section, has a very specific size, and so I even think it's like an origami.
I know, it's exactly
it
like
was
that.
Amazing. And so and then the mirror was folded in itself right as well, so then that had to also open out. And of course the mirrors are the whole power of the telescope. If they're not working, you have nothing.
Well, even the sun shield, if the sun shield doesn't deploy, you can't.
Of course.
So and then the secondary, every single part of it, this is what I mean by the 300 and however many.
What?
If just one of them doesn't work, it's the space junk. So that happened, and it went well. It went perfectly after 2 weeks, and then for the few months after that, we started to commission the telescope. And all the commissioning means is you make sure everything works as it should, and as expected. So you have to make sure the telescope is able to walk before you give it to the astronomers to make it run. Okay, you do simple things just to make sure it's doing everything correctly. And what we were doing in the MIRI team was trying to, define a series of steps to fix the data. The data doesn't come from the telescope like the images you see released to the public. It's filled with detector effects and all sorts of stuff. Like on the left here, this is an example of a raw image from the telescope. And you can see there's lots of noise and
like streaks and stuff. I can see streaks. And
that's
all that,
not real. That's introduced by the detector.
Oh, okay.
And what you need to do is understand these, where do they come from, and define steps and algorithms to correct and remove those. Because what you need to do is remove all effects of the telescope and leave just the pure image of the sky. Okay, so you just want to leave exactly what goes into the telescope, remove the telescope from the equation, and let the scientists then work on what's observed. So we do, well, before launch, we were doing much like Johnny's example, doing ground testing. And we were using cryovac chambers, which are huge chambers to kind of simulate the temperatures and pressures in space. And the one on the right actually is very interesting. It's the big cryovac chamber at NASA Johnson in Houston. And this is where they train the Apollo astronauts to do their spacewalks in there. And it was the only chamber capable of holding the fully deployed mirror and the instruments for testing. So we did that a few years ago, but this gave us an idea of what we needed to do in space during commissioning. And we kind of got a feeling of what effects we should look out for, what we needed to correct for, what might change after launch and so on. And this is just a quick schematic that this is just one segment of the steps that we apply to correct the data. So it's a very complicated process to take the telescope data, the raw data from the telescope, and produce science-ready products to be released to the public or to be given to scientists. Okay. So the commissioning went very well, and the first thing to be commissioned was the mirrors, which NASA released these engineering images that showed that everything was working so well, and you can see each of the instruments that I mentioned before. MIRI is on the top right. MIRI is the most beautiful, always the most beautiful, because it shows you the interstellar medium. Okay, it shows you material in the interstellar medium.
And that's because it's mid-infrared, right?
That's because, because it's showing a lot of the interstellar medium is quite cold, so it really highlights the cold material in the interstellar medium. But that wasn't the first MIRI image. This is the first MIRI image. The very, very first one, and it's kind of boring to some degree, but we were looking at it because the positions of the stars in this are very, very well known, so we could do a lot of testing. And the reason I'm showing this is because I worked on this image. So this is a picture of me in my office at 2 a.m. in April, when everybody else was asleep, downloading this first exposure with MIRI. This is the first time MIRI was exposed to the sky. And I had to work for 12 hours straight to apply the set of steps to clean it up so it could be presented. It was the first presentation of real MIRI data that was presented to the entire JWST collaboration. So there's thousands of people, I think, were on this call. And it was the first moment that I went, oh my God, I'm involved in something so important. And my name was second on the list. Yeah, exactly. The pressure.
And you were second on the list. Wow, that's
I hasten to add, I wasn't the second most important person. I was just second on the list. But yeah, it was the first moment that I thought, well, the last 7 years have been well worth it. But soon after, we all went to Baltimore to the Space Telescope Science Institute, and just off to the right is the center there. And we worked for 3 months, and it was very intense and very hard, and ultimately very rewarding. It was one of the best 3 months of my life. And just to go back to something I think JohnE and Niamh mentioned is that even at this, this amazing team of astronomers, by the way, is the biggest thing, the nicest thing about working on MIRI was working in an international team like this. It was just so amazing. But in the end, we just all revert back to our junior selves and create post-its of what needs to be done.
The to-do lists.
The to-do list, yeah. So what's shown here, this is for one. I worked on the Miri spectrometer, and this is our to-do list, which was 3 days before we had to give our final thing, our final presentation, and we had done nothing except one thing, which we just put there to, you know, we'd done it months ago. But this is in the library at the Space Telescope Science Institute. And, you know, 3 days later, of course, we obviously got everything done. And the end of June, we'd fully commissioned Miri. So we checked out everything. Everything was working perfectly, or it was actually better than expected. All the other instruments then were finished. They went through similar processes. And June 12th, 11th, I think this was June 11th. So this was the night before the release.
Oh yeah, this is when the president released this one, yeah.
Released the first image, the first public image taken by JWST. I'll talk about the image in a minute. But we also had a lot of events here in Ireland. So my favorite was that we showed the images at the National Concert Hall.
Oh, that's beautiful.
In Dublin. And the person standing up on to the left there is Professor Tom Ray. So he's our professor in DIAS, who is the co-PI of Miri, which means he was one of the original people to propose the instrument. And he's my boss. So he gave a beautiful kind of slideshow at the concert hall showing the first images. This was a couple of days after the release.
That's
okay, so I can talk a bit about the images now and the science, if that's okay, if I'm okay for time.
Yeah, we've got another 5 minutes, I'd say. That'd be brilliant. Thanks, Paddy.
So
this is fascinating, by the way. This is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. So you don't design these things. You don't say, I want to build a big telescope. Let's see what the biggest telescope we can build and put in space. That's not how it works. What you do is it's a scientific method, right? You want to, know what you want. You want to define what you want to do with your telescope. Okay, so you want to identify questions in science or in astronomy that we want to, look at the birth of stars and protoplanetary systems. We need an infrared telescope to do that because Hubble can't see through the gas and dust, like Niamh mentioned. We want to look at the assembly of galaxies through cosmic time. Hubble can only see so far back in the universe because light gets stretched as it travels across the expanding universe, but you need an infrared telescope to see even further back. We want to look at the very first starlight, which is the earliest you can look, apart from the cosmic microwave background, with the current facilities that are available. And we want to look at the planets and the origins of life. So we want to see, could life exist on planets outside the solar system, orbiting around other stars, or also in our own solar system. So these were kind of the 4 science themes that defined the design and development of JWST. And these are kind of, each of these basically points to a moment of evolution for us, okay, of our sun. So if you think about the early universe, what were the first stars? Did they form in clusters? Were there already galaxies? Then these were the ancestors to our sun. What about the assembly of galaxies over time? So that's talking about how did the Milky Way come into existence? What about the birth of stars and protoplanetary systems? So that's how did the solar system come into existence? And then you go to planets and the origins of life. So how did planets and life, how prevalent are they? How did they come into existence? Because basically you're looking at snapshots of our evolution through different stages of the universe. So this is sort of at the first light and reionization theme that we got the first JWST deep field. So JWST looked at a galaxy cluster, which is the bright white galaxies in the center of this image. This image only took about 12 hours, which is insane, okay, because it's the deepest image we have in the infrared of the universe. So there's galaxies in this image that are over 13 billion light years away. That means they're only a few 100 million years old, or a few 100 million years after the Big Bang.
And the equivalent picture of this, of course, is if we go to the Hubble took one like this, but I think it was like a 30-day exposure, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Hubble used to go back and look at the same patch of sky,
but
over
not to this depth. Yeah, so that
not was depth, but that's why it's called the first deep field, because it is doing ultra deep fields as well, and it's going to do an ultra deep field with Miri next month. So all of this is still to come. This is just the first example of the power of the telescope. So we've done
these are like kind of these are like you know, the promo shots, like if you're going into a store, it's kind of showing you, this is, if you bought this camera, this is what you get. Like we're only beginning, because these are comparison of existing images, right? So that we could see, this is how much better we could see these. That's what happened on July 12th. Okay, absolutely, Paddy, amazing.
Then you're talking about the assembly of galaxies. So you're looking at how galaxies formed over time, how the Milky Way came to be. And this is Stefan's quintet. It's a grouping of 5 galaxies. Actually, the galaxy on the bottom isn't related to the rest of them. It's much further, or much closer or further away. I can't remember. But the other galaxies are all interacting, and it's believed this is how galaxies like the Milky Way came to be, that formed through, you know, galaxies merging over time. And this is a snapshot of that process.
And this was the one, this was the one that ESA shared, right? From ESTEC. This was the one that was shared live from ESA. In Darmstadt.
Maybe, yeah, it could have been.
Stefan's I think Stefan's quintet. This is Stefan's quintet. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. Then also we had the cartwheel recently, and I was waiting for the cartwheel to come out because I was on console when this image was taken. So now that doesn't mean to say I took the image, but I was working on the Miri station when we were gathering this data. So I've been waiting for a while for this one to come out so I could tell everybody.
It's so beautiful. It's just beautiful.
So
it's like a jellyfish or something.
Yeah, what this is, again, this is the product of 2 galaxies merging, and it gives us, it's like this outer ring is spinning after the merger of the 2 galaxies. So it's it's just showing how galaxies like our Milky Way would have kind of come to be over cosmic time. This was originally my favorite of them all, which is the Carina Cosmic Cliffs, which is looking at it's a star forming region. So in the gas and dust you see here, embedded in there are stars like our sun, still in their formation stages, and they have disks around them that planets are forming in. So this is kind of a snapshot of what the something like the solar system would have been born out of. So like the sun would have been in a star forming region like this at some point in its history.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
This is a kind of a jump now to our future. So this is what the sun will look like in about 5 billion years. So we have when the sun is dying, it will start to throw off its outer layers into space, and that's what you're seeing here. It's an object called a planetary nebula. This is the Southern Ring Nebula, and all of this material is successive blasts of the outer layers of the stars out into the interstellar medium, and that are now being lit up by the core that was left of the star. And just to give you some context, our entire solar system would fit easily in the blue region. So at some point in the future, Earth is going to, be subject to this kind of bombardment of solar material and radiation from the core.
It's the depth of the images, I think, is what makes the James Webb. It's like you can see the 3D.
Absolutely.
You can see in through, as opposed to, it's not flat. You can see the layers of detail. Incredible. It must be so exciting, Paddy, to be an astronomer at this stage.
Absolutely.
To be an astronomer right now it's the best time, right?
Yeah, and like kids who are in secondary school now, I mean, if anyone comes into astronomy, they will come through into working with JWST data. It's just the first generations of students and young astronomers are now getting access to these data, which is just amazing. We have had images of exoplanets with JWST, so this was kind of the first exoplanet image. So what's happening here is that if you look at the bottom row of images, the star is where the host star of these planets was located, but JWST has instruments that can block that light out and show you what's in orbit around the star. And this is the first example of that, where we imaged the exoplanet HIP 65426b. Okay. And we also had the beautiful images of our own solar system. We had Jupiter. And there's some of the smaller moons you can see out to the left there, the little moon. For Jupiter, it's basically just reflected starlight apart from the aurora. The reason that the red spot and everything stand out is they're much higher up in the atmosphere, so they just reflect more of the light. But my favorite image now is not the Carina Cliffs, it's this image, which is Neptune. And this was released a couple of weeks ago. And I absolutely love this image because it's I think it's I think it should hold a record for an image that shows something so close in the universe, like Neptune, and the bright star-like thing in the middle is Triton. Okay, it's a Neptunian moon.
Gosh.
But it also shows all of the background galaxies in distance. So it's showing something that's in our own solar system, but also stuff moving out through cosmic time, you know, deep into the universe. And a beautiful galaxy, the beautiful spiral in the bottom left. It's an absolutely amazing image. Yeah, so
it's like it's like we're seeing, it's like we've just got an upgrade in our you know, our eyeglasses prescription, isn't it? It's just like suddenly everything is clearer.
Yeah, but it's the big mirror, and it's the big mirror that also gives you all of the background galaxies and everything, because it just collects so much light that any image it takes is a deep field. Any image it takes, you will just get galaxies in the background.
Oh my God.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's an amazing piece of engineering, and it's working incredibly well. And scientists are just, you know, this is my lie. I always like to leave this image up since it came out, but just to kind of say as well that people don't realize this, as Niamh, you mentioned it, you know, the first image release was images that were just taken just to show what the telescope can do. But those objects were chosen because scientists did not choose them for the first year of observations. That means that nobody was interested in looking at those things. The scientists are interested in more interesting things. So just imagine what is still to come. And I have seen some, like I work on some of the programs, and I know two in particular that should be released before Christmas, and they are absolutely jaw-dropping images. So, and that's just me. There's thousands of astronomers working on these. So yeah, it's going to be an amazing telescope for the next decade at least. You know, a funny point about the extension in the mission lifetime, it's true that there's enough fuel now for 20 odd years, but the telescope was never designed to last for 20 years. It was designed to last for 10. So now there's a kind of a rush to figure out, well, you know, will this break before 20 years or not?
Yeah.
Everything was designed to last 10 years. It was never designed and tested to last more. So it remains to be seen if it will indeed last that long, and potentially can, but yeah.
And it's fun. Thank you so much for sharing your passion and explaining it so clearly. And I'm quite emotional, I have to say, because I really feel that you know, we're on the cusp of something extraordinary, and to have Irish involvement, to have you there, and I know your wife as well as an astronomer, and JohnE and everything. I feel like you'll keep us informed, and we'll always be able to kind of touch James Webb as long as you guys are around, and other Irish astronomers as they come in through this. So thanks for giving us a snapshot. And if you've questions, there's beautiful comments coming in about how beautifully you describe that yourself and JohnE so far. And I'm not at all surprised by that, because I would agree, speaking to you both, it's a privilege. So thank you. You'll be able to talk to Paddy more in the breakout session. So if you have specific questions, just keep them and ask away. And we have the plenary at the end as well. So we're only seeing the slightest bit of what's available in the mindset of JohnE and Paddy. So thanks, Paddy. That's great. So now let's bring forward a really important part of why today exists, and that's Francis and Martina McNamara representing you guys from JCT. So all this beautiful information, how do we now make it part of the curriculum? Like Paddy said a few things there about the scientific method, and JohnE was talking about, like, you know, the engineering and the testing, and then, you know, the bigger questions that we want to understand about the planets that might match the JCT curriculum, but over to the two of you, because this is where you're going to help the people watching today understand how to merge these two kind of parts of where information has to meet for students.
Yeah, super. Thanks, Niamh. Martina and I were chatting about this during the week, and I come to this with a background in astronomy. It's what I studied, but I've also taught secondary. So I'm kind of straddling the education and the astronomy side. Martina, her own background is as a serving teacher in Ireland.
Yeah.
You know, Martina, do you want to introduce yourself and say hi?
And hi, everyone. I'm Martina McNamara. I teach at Enniskeely College, Gael, Gloucester and Clark. So I teach Earth and Space through Irish, which is challenging
Martina.
in itself. Yeah.
It's an added layer of complexity.
It is, but I was just, and thanks to you and JohnE and Paddy, because you're after giving me so many insights, which we can discuss in the breakout rooms. But I suppose you've made a really relevant point, Niamh. How do we bring this back to the classroom?
Yeah.
And I suppose it's how we make it accessible, because we're all teaching students with different levels of ability. I'm teaching it, just for example, even the language can be very challenging for Earth and Space, and you're teaching the Big Bang.
Yeah, it's a lot of words, isn't it? There's a lot of jargon,
words, yeah.
and that's the thing sometimes I find is what limits people from feeling comfortable to move into something.
Yeah, and even when you're teaching it, like my expertise is not in astronomy, like, so for me, it's how do I break it down for myself? And I said, I kind of mentioned that to Francis when we were talking the other day, like we have our learning outcomes, we were discussing that, and I suppose you go to the action verb. So like I was just thinking there, if we're looking at Nature Science 1, students should be able to appreciate how scientists work and how scientific ideas are modified over time. So just even the action verb, to appreciate and to recognize the meaning on, have a practical understanding of, like, just for example, there we've mentioned the Irish involvement. JohnE and Paddy have illustrated, Patrick have illustrated like the work that they've done. And I think that's very inspiring to our students to show that there is an Irish contribution. Because sometimes I feel students think it's just more in the globe, that where is Ireland and what's,
they think it's NASA, you know.
Yeah, and then you explain like all the Irish contributions, and we look at, like, you know, we're even talking about the observatories and you know, little things like that which they're not aware of. And then they actually, they're very, you know, inspired to go away and look it up, and they'll come back to you, especially the Earth and Space nerds, as we'd say, because they really want to show what they've learned and how they, you know, that will add to their learning. But I think just from the discussions there, I think it's like how we break it down in terms of how we make it accessible, because as we said, the language can be challenging. But just for example, Johnny put up the image of the rocket, I think. Like, you know, for why we test and why, and the structure of the rocket and the explosion, that links to other learning outcomes, which is so important. We're not teaching them in isolation, we're linking them together. And that's what Francis and I were discussing briefly the other day, that like, how do we allow this? So I suppose it's like the breakout rooms, I think, are going to really enable us to share ideas. Like I have, for example, I just taught Earth and Space 8. So we were looking at students should be able to illustrate how Earth processes and human factors influence, students should, that's Earth and Space 7. We were looking at space exploration. And I just was mentioning, like, Tanya, that I did a walking debate, because I had a lot of students that were very much like, no, this is a waste of money. And then I had two students who were the big James Webb fans. They were there on Christmas Day, who would message me on Google Classroom to say, it's happening, Miss. You know, like, so that shows how that's
two very different.
Two very different contrasting outlooks. But the walking debate was really good, because I said, now, you know, you're on that, if you're on the fence, you're on the fence. So we had a few in the middle that were like, look, it's worthwhile. You had other students saying, no, you should be investing in it in healthcare, etc. And then what I was really interested in, other students who really were, you know, supporting the concept of space exploration. So I got them to write, you know, they were writing a newspaper article to the Irish Times. And you know what, it was really brilliant, because it showed like that a lot of students just need that discussion amongst themselves, and allows them to communicate to scientists, because there's some students that just can't access this. They find it very difficult. But when you talk at that level and to their peers, you know, that's what we need. That's what we need to kind of, I suppose, the environment we need to facilitate. So
and Martina, I'd say, like, the other thing is, like, I love the idea of the walking debate, because you don't necessarily have to be a space geek. It's just that you have to, I would imagine, and I'm not teaching you how to suck eggs, but I imagine as somebody looking on the outside in, it's about giving them the information in such a way that they feel empowered to make an opinion. And it doesn't matter if it's pro or against, it's just that they feel, I know enough about this to say this is a waste of time, or this is something that I want to be involved in. Isn't it?
Sorry, Francis.
Also to say, I was interested listening to Paddy when he said a lot of scientists thought this would never get off the ground.
That's right.
A lot of
people didn't.
At some point, do you say we've spent enough money and we're not spending any more? Or do you keep spending the money because you've already spent it? I think, exactly. Isn't that called the Concord fallacy? Once you spent a certain amount of money, the money's lost, so you've got to keep spending more. Maybe Webb was one of those, but I think the science that's coming from it is making it amazing.
It's justifying it, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what the student said. And that's actually in Francis, as in they were comparing it to Hubble.
Yeah.
It, like when James Webb was launched, like, and it, you know, it's just with your scheme of work in school, like I had taught the current third-years Nature Science 2. So I had done, you know, we looked at the Big Bang. So I was trying to link that back now to Earth and Space 8. Okay. So I suppose it was interesting that they were able to bring that in and say, well, Miss, like, you know, it's the evolution of cosmology and all, you know, they were just brilliant. They were like, look at how everything's changing so quickly. And that's amazing for 15-year-olds, which I think is very inspiring. And it also, like, you know, I think JohnE had said, like, he's, you know, he got into his role and his studies because he had an interest in a personal interest in space. And a lot of students that I teach would have a personal interest. And they ask me, am I an Earth to space nerd? And I'm like, I'm not. It's not my biggest forte. I'm interested, but I think I learn as much from the students as well, which is really important, because it's great for them to go away, and sometimes you like let them steer the classroom, like they can do little presentations, and I suppose it allows them to share information, which is really good because they're communicating together, and that links us back like to the different learning outcomes in nature science. So they should be able to research and present information, which I think is really important to kind of promote that and empower them to feel comfortable to do that. And there's no right or wrong, in the sense of arguments, it's a debate.
I just want to make a plug for a particular site which is really useful for comparing Webb and Hubble images. So we've seen some amazing Webb images, but the children might be more familiar, and often the adults are, with Hubble images because Hubble's been around so long. So there's a site, Webb Compare, that puts a Hubble image versus a Webb image. And the other one that I'm really going to make a plug for is the esaweb.org, because the communications officer for ESAWeb has the most amazing press releases that explain what's going on in the images. I know Patty talked us through the images, but you might feel like, I can't show this picture because I don't know what's in it. The ESAWeb press releases, Bethany has done a star job. She was one of our Space Career Profiles this year. It's her job to take the science and make it PR friendly, make it explainable. So esaweb.org has the press releases with the science content being shared. And I'll put both those links in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Frances. That's fantastic. I'm conscious of time. We said we'd kind of do a bit of a screen break at the moment. Is there anything else the two of you would like to kind of say at this stage, well, or will it all happen in the breakout?
It'll all happen in the breakout rooms, because Martina and I are a pair in the breakout rooms, which is what we're doing after break. So I know people in the chat are suggesting lots of learning outcomes. We'll talk through that in much more depth, much more sharing of how you think you'll actually engage with this. There's plenty to come, but we do need a little bit of a stretch.
We do, particularly online. Everybody needs to kind of, what do they call it, an eye breaker? There's a nice word for it, I can't remember. But we have 10 minutes. We've 10 minutes towards this now, and now let's kind of really get into it. I mean, I think we've got 4 breakout sessions, and you're going to be speaking to myself, JohnE, Paddy, and then Martina and Frances, and you'll get 10 minutes each. So let's just keep chewing away and like what's the thing? Where's the connections? How can we make this more relevant? What do you need to know? What's the support? And we'll all see if we can come up with something together in this kind of co-created thing. Stephanie, is there anything you want to say when you jump in? Because I saw you came on screen there.
No, it's just to ask Frances to put those links in the Padlet also.
Oh yeah.
They're already in the Padlet, but I've popped them in the screen.
Thanks very much. Okay, guys.
In the chat.
So what time we come back, Frances? What time we come back from
shall we say give ourselves our 10 minutes?
I think so, yeah.
I think so. It's 11:27 now, so we're just a few minutes behind schedule. We'll still be okay with our plenary and aim to finish up for 12:30. So if we come back at 11:37.
Yeah. And thanks again to JohnE and Paddy for super
just say, when you come back, you should see an invite to attend a breakout room. So that invite will be in place for you when you return from break, and we'll get those breakout rooms going as soon as everybody comes back.
All right, great stuff. See you in a few minutes, guys. So far, so good. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Stuff.
Thanks, bye-bye.
I'm blown away by the response of this morning. I think a lot of people got a lot of different things out of it for lots of different reasons. I think that extend beyond the science curriculum. A lot of them are about inspirational people, about kind of getting people to think about what they want to do with their lives. I had just a huge array of conversations, but how do we run this? What's the best use of this time, Frances, and pulling it all together? Because I'm conscious that we still need to finish at 12:30. I appreciate any advice that you'd give us on how to run this.
We're aiming so the breakout rooms are just closing. The last people that we've formally closed, so we still have people just chuntering in on top of us.
Okay.
We've got a couple of things we'd like to accomplish with this, which is kind of a plenary pulling together. So it may be that we might ask each of the facilitators who saw, a room at a time, kind of summarize some of the highlights or the sense of that room, because, Martina and I were bumping you out and being bumped out by Paddy in turn. And our focus was very much on the education. I think our JCT colleagues will probably have a nicer idea that maybe even if we get 30 or 40 seconds from each room, kind of hit some of the highlights or some of the things that you covered. And may I just remind you that the Padlet is there as our shared learnings. We had a really interesting comment from Eilish in the last room we were in about when do you teach certain things and when do you do, and really looking for input and discussion. So please do feel that you can add to the Padlet, all right? We're not going to whisk it away. There was a question earlier from Paul Nugent about could this recording be shared? We have recorded it. Give us a chance to do something with it, okay? Because the raw recording may not be what you need. So yes, the intention is to share it. And certainly we had a couple of people who weren't able to make it who indicated that to me, and we will have a recording available to share with you, but give us a chance to edit it. And yes, we hope to have a more lasting record from this session, okay? So I think perhaps if we hit the facilitators.
Yeah, so our lovely facilitators, which were, of course, I have everybody's names here. We have Kevin, Siobhan, Jamie, Anya, and Fiona. If you want to kind of tell us your takings, what you were hearing in each of the rooms.
So Francis just started off there with my room. Eilish was just asking about, like how can we, kind of like just try and hit everything. And Francis was talking about taking the spiral approach and do good old like hitting on all the learning outcomes and all the way through first, second and third year. Yeah, there was loads of great discussion. Tom was in our room and he was looking at kind of designing a scenario maybe based on based on the mission and how we could try and hit as many possibilities as possible. And Paddy was very direct in saying that you could not go and service or astronauts could not go and service the telescope. It's just too far away. Yeah, the James Webb side too far away. So yeah, no, there was loads of great chat in our room. So that was breakout room 3.
Three. And then we go to breakout room 1 then. What went down in 1?
Hello, Niamh. Yeah, no, there's great conversations going. We mentioned we love the Irish context, the fact that it's in our back door, that the students can relate to it. That, like, even myself, you do forget how much Ireland does contribute to science and society, that kind of way. Just removing that barrier, I love that. And yeah, and definitely, it's a great day overall. Like, really enjoyed it, and
Yeah. I think the Irish. I think that's I heard that a lot right across the room. I think that there's a surprise that Ireland is so interwoven into something that has such a global significance, and I think that we should be shouting it from the rooftops. There was one room I was kind of saying, I think maybe it was our room, we were talking about in history books, we've kind of erased this fantastic identity that we've always had with science. So how do we rewrite that, and how do we instill in this generation that they're part of a country with a very rich legacy of science achievement, and to make them feel that they can stand on the global stage proudly,
And you were in the room where we mentioned that a lot of science is all about failures, that actual failure can actually turn to another success if you just maybe twist the focus. We mentioned about penicillin and other things that came from failure and led to success, and innovation. So get the students to take risks, and don't be afraid to make a prediction. Sometimes your prediction's wrong, and that's fine, but you can always justify it later. I think that's important.
And that's the scientific method, right? So scientific method isn't about getting it right. It isn't about reporting the successes. It's actually about reporting the process. I think, exactly. that can sometimes get overlooked. Thanks, Kevin. That's great. So thank you very much. And breakout session 2, breakout room 2.
That was myself in there. Yeah. And we had similar conversations there about the richness and what exciting times there is, the richness of possibilities out there. And we talked about students being able to see it, and if they can see it, and they can be it, and I think that's really important, that they get an opportunity to see, again, that richness that we have, the historical richness and the current entrepreneurial spirit. And then we're talking about the skills that students need, and this move away from the curriculum of the past, where it's rote learning, and actually developing those skills, critical thinking, problem solving, both with John and Paddy. They were talking about how they're problem solvers, and you know, that really that's such an important skill that we need to kind of, you know, start the process of with our students in junior cycle.
It's so true, Jamie, isn't it? And we need to find a way of making failure, celebrating failure, because all understanding comes from failure. I think if you don't make a mistake, you never really understand what you did right. You know what I mean? It's just potluck. It's very important to understand something, and the only way, like it's how we train our bodies. It's how, you know, you see change. But yet for some reason in science we think, oh, you have to get it right or else you can't start, and it's the wrong approach entirely. Thank you, thanks for that. And then lastly, breakout room 4. Then what were your key takeaways from your discussions in the room?
That was myself in there, and a lot of our discussions went back to, like, say, in the classroom about having workarounds and encouraging students to think outside the box. And that even when it comes to like degrees, I think one of the guest speakers were saying that when they look at CVs now, everyone has a degree. Okay, someone comes in at first, and I thought, okay, they're clearly just something. But if everyone is 2-1, 2-2, they look at what they've done with that, extracurricular or outside, and that's how they know what people are actually like. So that, I suppose we can bring that back to like things like Gaishka in the school or like STEM clubs.
Yeah.
It's about bringing science to life and life to science, and you don't have to be nerdy to be a scientist, and to try to encourage students to go with what they want. And he was talking about the career show coming up soon. There's one lady going to speak at that. She was a filmmaker, then she became a doctor, and now she's a captain in the army, because she went with what she wanted to do. And that we shouldn't stop students and say, well, you're not sciencey, you're not mathsy, you're not doing honours maths, and take the eliteness away from having to do physics, applied maths, and maths to be intelligent. That's what we kind of come up with. Bringing science to life, and just creating that safe space in our classrooms for students to fail. And we kind of went into that last year in our cluster day about student autonomy, encourage them to fail again, but every time they fail, once they learn from it, it's not failure.
No.
And that's where most of our conversations tended to go.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. There's something I did a TEDx talk about embracing failure, you know, because as a performer, you know, I improvised a lot, and you have to, the magic happens in the fails, you know. And when I was kind of trying to refocus my life, I had this thing about like 99% is the only way forward. And having been in a creative room, I realized that was the worst possible way to be. And I looked up the definition of the word failure, and the definition of the word failure is the absence of success. So to me, that immediately went, so failure cannot exist without success. So they're kind of interdependent. And I saw this line and this kind of scale where success was on one end and failure was on the other. And I realized that if I did anything every day that met some objective, for me, it was about, like, you know, my passion for space, I wasn't failing. The only way I was failing was when I was doing nothing. And I think that's the thing that we have to understand, that failure means the absence of success. Therefore, it is completely and utterly interconnected with success. So if you do anything, you're succeeding. But brilliant, great stuff. Gosh, that was a really incredible morning. I really feel that something really special happened today. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking your Saturday morning to contribute. You know, the discussion, I think, is really the most powerful part of any sort of event. And I think the breakout sessions really showed that I think we're all on the same page. We're all like incredibly passionate now, thanks to the personal stories that you gave us, JohnE and Paddy. And I think that's what was so transformative this morning, that it was a really great, I think you gave us an insight into your life, but you also explained very well the science behind and the engineering behind of what you're doing, but you personalized it. And I think by personalizing it, you brought us in and you made us feel that what you were doing was relative to us. You made us think bigger, you made us think philosophically, but you also made us think about the science and stuff behind it. And you helped us apply to JCT. So I don't think we could have planned for a better session, you know. So I'm going to hand back now to Stephanie, just to close up and to say the amazing thank yous to everybody. But it's been an absolute privilege having this discussion with you this morning. So thanks, and, you know, a great mid-space week and a fabulous confluence. Stephanie, what would you like to finish with?
To reiterate the thank you, Niamh, thanks to all the speakers, to yourself, to JohnE, Paddy, to Francis, Martina. Thanks to the JCT team for moderating and for helping us to put together this. And of course, thanks to the team in Blackrock Castle Observatory. But most of all, thanks to you, the teachers, for joining us on this Saturday morning. Thanks for giving up your time. I said at the beginning, I hope you will find it useful. I hope you find stuff that you can use in your classrooms. I will leave with one plea. Please fill in the evaluation form. Please tell us what you liked, but most importantly, tell us if there's something you didn't like, or if there's some other way that we can support you in the classroom. Please, I would really beg you, please, to fill out the evaluation and give us that honest feedback for what works for you, what maybe doesn't work for you, and if you have other ideas. And with that, I think we'll close off for today, and thanks again to everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a super Saturday. Enjoy that sunshine. It might be raining tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. See you now.
Everyone.
Ar míle mai agah, lean agus banna.